The following podcast is a presentation of Project Entertainment Network.
Welcome back to the Horror Academic, and this is a Sci-fi Academic episode this month. And because we're talking about one of the most important monster movies ever made, I brought in an expert with us today from Gargantucast. Here's Chris. Say hi, Chris.
Hello, I'm Chris at Gargantucast.
Tell everybody a little bit about what you guys do, just in case they're not familiar with the show.
Well, they should, but
They should
anyway,
be, but...
Gargantucast, me and my co-host Cole Grisson, we basically go through kaiju, tokusatsu, and general monster movies with humor and insight, because we just love these movies, and we go through them, their themes, important production histories, their place in genre, how they represent the time they are, whether it's just like, politics or just, genre trends and all that stuff.
And since we're going to talk monster movies, I figured we should talk the granddaddy of all monster movies and go with the original Godzilla, Gojira.
Gojira.
The 1954 edition. So let's talk a little bit about that first. Why Godzilla? Why is it Gojira and why is it 1954? Now, I don't know about you, but the first time I saw it was called Godzilla King of Monsters.
Same.
And I thought the release date was 1956. So let's talk a little bit about what the difference is between the 54 and the 56 versions.
It's similar, but very significant.
Yes, definitely. Definitely a huge tonal difference.
It's very much tonal difference because it's a very different shift of perspectives nationally.
Yeah. So the film originally came out by Touhou Pictures in 1954 in Japan. When it was bought by an American releasing company, they Americanized the easiest way to say it. They added an American character who Raymond Burr. He comes in to narrate the story for us, to kind of walk us through a story that we probably would have understood fine if we had been left with at the time, probably a good dub. It wasn't a subtitle type of thing in the 50s, but
it would have probably been dubbed, at least.
Yeah. I can't remember subtitles really being popular in films until maybe much later, like 60s or 70s.
Yeah.
So, but I think the main reason is because Americans want to look at it as a fun horror film or monster movie, where there's a lot deeper meaning when you watch the original version.
Yes, it is very much night and day. If you grew up watching the original Godzilla King of the Monsters, you just think like, oh, it's just like something akin to Beast of 20,000 Fathoms, or
Yes.
a lot of Ray Harryhausen's work, or King Kong, where it's very much just a popcorn film. It is, but once you watch the original, it is probably, I would say, the darkest, bleakest entry in the Godzilla films. Even with some of the darker films, this film is completely bleak.
Yeah, it's very different experience. And it's probably has a lot to do with the kind of American attitude of Godzilla movies. Our introduction being this kind of Raymond Burr version with King of the Monsters, because, like you said, it's kind of it's a popcorn flick. It's just made, you can definitely see all the things that definitely had influence, like King Kong, like Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, but they whitewash all of the meaning behind what Godzilla is even there to represent.
Yeah, and even though the American version does have some importance, like how it basically was the world's introduction to Godzilla, because that was the one that got exported the most before basically the 21st century, when we Americans actually got to finally see the original Gojira. But the thing, and as well as this is like post World War II, so we finally get a Godzilla film, not even just a film for Americans that actually portrayed the Japanese people as sympathetic. But the thing is, it doesn't have. It is very neutered.
Hmm.
Again, like it wouldn't be it's just comparing it to the original Gojira. It's just like it almost it's like it has some importance still, but it's just so insulting at times, especially if you how edited and how like mishandled a lot of the drama scenes that are in this original version.
It's true. I mean, I was thinking about that too, that the 56 version definitely kind of talks down to the audience and diminishes a lot of the things, even the things that you're seeing because of the narrative that's added on top of it. You're kind of given this idea of this is okay, this is something kind of normal. Not here's some people going through some really horrific things, but it seems to be put in place in it's like a hurricane or a tornado or some natural disaster in the way that they almost discuss it. And when you watch, like rewatching this week, the original 54 cut, you realize just how much of the movie is about people.
Very much so. Like people say, "Oh, I don't care about the humans. I just
Right.
want the monsters." I feel like that's very dismissive of these films because a lot like if you especially watch the original Japanese versions
Hmm.
from the show era because a lot like Shiro Honda is a masterful filmmaker where he's like for those who don't know he was trying to be a filmmaker growing up and then he was drafted into World War II, which he completely hated, but he was
Hmm.
forced to do some heinous things. Faye from Something Ghoulish wrote a really great piece on reconciling how Ishiro Honda, had to go through did terrible things in World War II
Hmm.
because it was that or a bullet to the head at
Yeah,
that time, which is
this service was mandatory,
yeah.
and he was put into a position where he had to essentially follow orders. I mean, that was his job, and it was also kind of his life on the line. But
Hmm.
at the same time, there's a really great in the special edition Criterion box set of all the era. Uh, there's a really nice interview with him,
Hmm.
and Honda talks about um, he was part of the first class at the first film program at the university in Japan because it was like a brand new field to study. And going through that and going through apprenticeships, he actually was already uh, kind of working up to the point of being like an AD at Toho when he got called into service. And
Hmm.
he had put in time at the same time as Akira Kurosawa. Oddly enough, it was kind of fun to find out the relationship that they had.
Yeah, they were very close friends.
Yeah, I didn't realize that they were the same age, that they came up together. But Kurosawa was not called into service. He continued his career, moved up the ladder. Honda, while he was at war, I think he served for 8 years, which meant he was in the military longer than he had actually put in time at Toho. So when he did finally come back, he had to start all over again. So it
Yeah.
took him a little longer before he got to direct his own films. He had to. It's very much even more so in Hollywood than the Hollywood system. Toho was very rigid, and you had to go through the steps. And he had to
Yeah.
start from scratch. And he said he was even told by many friends that perhaps you're too old to start as an apprentice and work your way up again. And he said there's nothing else he wanted to do. This was his passion. So
Hmm.
it's great to see that success story that comes from that kind of perseverance coming back to it. But it definitely affected the types of stories he wanted to tell, the way he told them. He talked about having toured Hiroshima after the bombing and how that affected him and how he needed that to be portrayed in the story.
Very
And
much
that
so.
it was a very serious subject to him. And
Yeah,
it didn't bother him that it was through genre.
because he felt through genre, you can get mass appeal.
Mhm.
And one thing about Shiro Honda that people need to understand is he is a very strong humanist and a very strong pacifist.
Mhm.
He, going through war, which he did not want to be involved in, and seeing the horrors of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, And later on, with the Lucky Dragon incident, for those who don't know, in 1954, several tuna fishermen were near the Bikini Atoll where the U.S. was testing hydrogen bombs. And even though they were willing and they were actually outside the blast zone that the U.S. made, the U.S. didn't realize how powerful that bomb was. So when it went off, it was much bigger, and those men were endowed with nuclear fallout, got severely sick. I know at least one of them passed away, as well as all their catch was completely irradiated, and it was a massive scandal, and strained a lot of Japanese and American relations. And the Americans, being America, doesn't want to admit fault, actually try to accuse those fishermen of being spies, which is completely irresponsible at best and repugnant at worst.
And that incident actually was the kind of impetus for the story of Godzilla. Between just the general impact that the A-bomb had on Japanese society, and it's really the impact that it had after the war. So living in a world after that has happened to you, how that affected them, the fear that was kind of ingrained in society around military action after that, because of now knowing how extreme the outcomes could be.
Especially, this is back in the 50s. This is where the Red Scare and the Cold War was escalating much higher and higher, and Japan basically was in the middle of America on one side and Russia on the other, which both are getting nukes, both are pissed at each other, and both are at the verge of pressing that button, and Japan is dead center in the middle, and they already experienced those nuclear powers firsthand, and they're the only nation to have been bombed so far, which hopefully they'll only be the only nation. I remember the fisherman who passed away of radiation, one of his dying words was, "I want to be the last man to die from the nuclear bomb."
Yeah.
And to the point where Japan is one of the few nations that have said no to having any nuclear arms in the first place. Not nuclear energy, but nuclear weapons entirely.
I mean, it's hard for us maybe to completely see how that still impacts Japanese life. I know every year there's the anniversary of the date of the bomb drop is mourned at Hiroshima, and you can still see the people who are left that are survivors or family members, much the way that we now think of 9/11 and the towers. It is still kind of reverent over there, just to see that these are people who are pretty freshly still dealing with this, and how it is affecting what type of story they want to tell. So we see Honda being the director given the task. The story is written for Touhou. There's a process to find the director. The producer has been attached to it from the beginning, though. So the same person.
He basically pitched the idea. Tomoyuki Tanaka. He was the story goes, when he was doing a film that was supposed to like ease relations between Japan and, I believe it was Indonesia.
Mm-hmm.
It was a project, but that fell through because of still post World War tension. So Tomoyuki Tanaka had to come back and tell Toho, "Hey, that film we planned, we have to scrap it." And the story goes, when he was looking down, and especially the story about the Lucky Dragon incident, he was like, he had an idea looking at the ocean. What if an atomic bomb awoke in a giant monster? Mm-hmm. And when he pitched it to Toho, they were like, "Well, we have a slot open for a movie, and I think this could work." Especially around not too long beforehand, King Kong was re-released in Japan, which was a massive hit, and The Beast in 20,000 Fathoms was also released, and it was also just a massive hit. So they realized, if we make our own giant monster movie, it'll be awesome. It'll be pretty cool, box office wise for Toho. So they saw it as a good investment, especially after this project that fell through.
Yeah, and apparently from what Honda says, there were 2 directors that were asked before him, and neither of them wanted to make a monster movie. They didn't want to make a science fiction film or a horror film. They wanted to do probably at the time Touhou was very they had different divisions, and you had your the romances, the action films, and the period pictures. And this was the genre pictures was kind of off to the side. And Honda said he had no fear of taking on a genre picture because he saw this opportunity to help tell this story. Um, and like we said before, I mean, it's a matter of him kind of taking his feelings of where he came from, having experienced the war firsthand, the story that was given to him of this monster being awoken by the bomb, and also the kind of general feel of wanting to make this not maybe not looking down on it as a topic. And he wanted to stress that to everyone on his crew that they wanted to take this seriously. It was an important thing, and he wanted them all to think, what would it really be like to live in fear of this kind of giant monster attacking their city? So they
Very
kind
much
of go
so.
from there. So we have this combination of the art director
Mm-hmm.
who's designing the monster, and Tsuburaya coming in as the special effects artist who's going to direct the special effects, and the two of them combining efforts to create how they're going to bring Godzilla to life.
Yeah, because Tsuburaya was brought on first because he was the premier special effects artist of Toho of Japan. For those who don't know, Eiji Tsuburaya has a long history of working in Japanese special effects. One of his earliest contributions, even before Godzilla, he made the Toho logo.
Oh wow,
He
yeah.
made an optical. He was really good at optical effects, and for Toho, he made their iconic logo. And during World War II, he did propaganda films with miniatures and battle scenes, which were so good that it actually tricked the U.S. thinking those were actual battle scenes. And Tsuburaya needed work because after World War II, he was blacklisted during the American occupation because Japan was not allowed to make any war films and films acknowledging the atomic bomb until roughly after the occupation ended in the early 50s.
Okay, because I was going to say I know there's a huge rush of films from the Japanese perspective of the war, of the particular battles of the war in the early '60s,
Yeah.
and Tsuburaya did a lot of the special effects for those.
Mm-hmm.
There's also on the Criterion Collection a really great uh, documentary that shows unused clips of some of his effects through the years and talks a little bit about going through the different directors who worked with him. So he's a huge impact on everything that's done here. His model work is extensive and in so many ways more realistic than other people had done before him in that field. Um, and we also have this kind of combination of ways that they show Godzilla.
Mm-hmm.
There's the suit version, like the as we call the suitimation, the actual person who's embodied in a suit of Godzilla. But there's also other little tricks that they use with kind of what we would now call blue screen, but layered effects um, that they use. I believe I used to think it was stop motion because I know they were very influenced by Willis O'Brien's King Kong
Yeah,
and Harryhausen.
Tsuburaya even originally wanted to use stop motion
Yeah,
for Godzilla, but the problem was the process is so much, especially post-war Japan, which doesn't have nearly the resources of Hollywood. It would have taken the project almost 3 years to complete, and Toho had a deadline. Like we have
yeah.
several months to make it, so they feasibly could not use stop motion aside from one scene of a car flipping and one scene involving Godzilla's tail.
I think there's one scene though that there's still almost like a puppet. That's
Well,
there's
yeah,
a
they
few
use
of
it.
the kind of like just headshots, right?
Yeah,
That are
it's
puppets.
a 1 foot Shukaku puppet,
Right. Yeah.
which is still of not stop motion, but it's still a much more practical effect.
Yeah. There's some slight differences that you can tell in kind of the shape of the face going
Yeah,
back and forth between those two, but they're still for 1954, they're extremely well blended for I mean if you take a look at American like an AIP picture that came out in the same time period, say, you're going to see a drastic difference in quality in how the monster is shown with people in the foreground.
And the thing with Tsuburaya and Watanabe, it's interesting when Tsuburaya was brought on, they didn't even had all was said that Tomoyuki Tanaka was a sea monster. It was very vague, and originally Eiji Tsuburaya wanted to do an octopus, a giant octopus, but Watanabe, had the idea because they went through several test drawings. There was one, I forgot the artist, but they had a popular comic artist, mangaka, to design a Godzilla design, but where the head it was the shape of an atom bomb, and it was much more mammalian. So, but eventually Watanabe was inspired by dinosaur books and dinosaur artwork, and that's what gave us the dinosaurian Godzilla that we all know and love.
Mm-hmm.
And so Tsuburaya basically had to tweak the Watanabe's design to work as a suit because they realized we don't have, the resources to make stop motion, so we have to make a suit. And I think one thing that annoys me with a lot of, cinemaphiles is this dismissiveness that stop motion and Willis O'Brien and Harryhausen work is superior than suitmation. And they ignore the fact that suitmation is a lot more involved than stop motion. Stop motion may be more time consuming, but suitmation is so work induced. It is very physically straining.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I mean, it's just two drastically different styles of creation at that point. It's like comparing, I don't know, like cell animation to digital animation. It's two completely different formats. The as far as the suits, I mean, we usually talk about horror films and a lot of the special effects that are done through practical effect, suits and things like that. Anything that would require, layers and layers of latex. And from those types of films, when you think of something like Evil Dead 2 and the Henrietta costume that Ted Raimi had to wear, I mean, it's kind of, everybody knows, I think all fans of Evil Dead 2 have at least seen a clip of him taking off the Henrietta head and just pouring out sweat. The same thing is totally true in the suitimation. These are heavy, they're thin in structure, but they're still heavy foam layers within it, and you're wearing that under the studio lights because most of the
Very
time they're
big,
shooting indoors.
heavy, not a lot of insulation in that
Yeah.
suit. Haru Nakajima has said he has lost 20 pounds during the production of Gojira, and every time they go through the suit, they have to replace the cod lining inside the suit, and they'll literally get a cup of sweat from him to the point where they couldn't have a lot of full shots of Haru in the complete suit. And a lot of times they try to use this just shows the great directing of Eiji Tsuburaya and Inshiro Honda, where they were like, okay, this suit is like probably going to kill this man. So they have shots where it's only Godzilla from the torso up, and then they have it from the torso down because I'm sure you see people have seen the set photos where it seemed Haru Nakajima was wearing basically Godzilla pants.
Yeah.
That was just so he
I was just
doesn't
thinking of that. Yeah.
so he doesn't die.
Yeah. I mean, it took them many incarnations to find it to be something a little bit more wearable, but it's still heavy.
I remember when they first made the suit, I forgot what material they used, but the thing is that material basically became concrete by the time where Haru Nakajima was in it, tried to move, and he completely fell over.
Yeah. I mean, and I think all of the stuntmen who were suit actors in this period all had to have extreme background, not just in working in a suit, which was still new in the early 50s, but also
Stuntmen,
stunt work in general.
martial arts.
A lot of them have a martial art background. There's also, there's their general acting skill. It's hard to think of. You're not going to expect Godzilla to recite Shakespeare, but he still has to know how to move and how to kind of evoke feelings and emotions, especially because he's not using words. These are still things that have to come across in creatures that we're going to follow the story of. He's not just this kind of mindless monster that shows up, steps on some houses, screams, and walks away until the next time we see him. We get to spend some time seeing him, and the more time we spend with seeing Godzilla, the more we start to see emotions. and
Yeah,
especially as the films progress.
definitely. And even with this film, going back to Inshiro Honda, where like, when we say this film is bleak, the thing is with this film, it is saying, you know, if we don't end our obsession with nuclear weapons and nuclear testing, people are going to suffer. People are going to suffer hard. And, even Godzilla himself is a victim. He was just minding his own business in the ocean, and his home was destroyed, like his underground home, and was mutated, and he's just lashing out like an animal. And Japan was just the closest vicinity because he's not gonna hunt down. He doesn't know it was America. We know it's America who was like. One thing I liked about the film is it wasn't trying to blame America for it, though we know who it is. It's trying to blame the fact that nuclear weapons is like a genie in the bottle, and we need to stop. And even Godzilla's death in most monster movies and stuff like that, when people like, oh, the monster is dead, people are like, biggest example of the differences between the American version and the Japanese version. In the American version, Godzilla's dead, and it's like, oh, spoiler alert, one of the characters, Dr. Serizawa, sacrificed himself using the oxygen destroyer, the only weapon that could kill Godzilla, in a very not so subtle illusion of Oppenheimer when he created the nuclear bomb.
Mm-hmm.
And in the American version, Raymond Burr basically said, "Oh, we'll remember Serizawa's sacrifice, but thank God Godzilla's dead." And movie ends.
Mm-hmm.
In the Japanese version, all the characters are devastated with Serizawa's sacrifice, and the main scientist of the film basically said, like, it was a hollow victory, and if we don't learn our lessons, we're going to get another Godzilla. And we don't even, and the one guy who had the one thing we had to kill it is dead. So this shows this bleakness, this, like, there is no victory out of this.
Mm-hmm.
It's not, it's sad. That's one way I could describe this movie. It's sad.
It's a very, I mean, it's, I don't know if I would say it's depressing, but it's realistic in so many ways
Mm-hmm.
of watching people going through trauma. The scenes just of, say, the villagers when the first wave of attacks from Godzilla, and their fishermen can't, there's nothing in the oceans that they can kind of sow. There's all of a sudden, the elder in town is saying, oh, it's the myth of Godzilla is coming back. We've done harm to the environment and it's going to come back to us. And then once those uh, fishing vessels start going missing, you watch these people,
Mm-hmm.
you watch regular citizens storm the disaster response center just to find out if their family members were part of that crew. And if, because there were 3 survivors, was my family member part of the survivors? So this isn't kind of blown away as just some people died. It's not like there's a lot of monster movies where you watch and entire villages, entire towns are decimated and they're just numbers. This is a story where they actually start to humanize the victims, the people who are lost from the very beginning. And you definitely feel that, and it builds as the kind of the cost of them not being able to figure out how to remove the threat of Godzilla just impacts more and more parts of Japan. And
And yeah, and that's the thing, I think, that the brilliance of this film, because this film is a very human focused story. You're so engrossed with the narrative that you don't mind the fact Godzilla's in the film for roughly 50 minutes of an hour and a half movie.
mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, there's even to kind of prepare you for what Godzilla will end up being. There's the first scientific troop that goes to investigate one of the sites, finds that the water is radiated, and it's starting to tell people you can't drink from this well. One of the officers is even telling the scientist who's doing the test, you shouldn't be touching anything. You need to have a hazard suit on. So it's like immediately there's impact,
Mm-hmm.
and it's
Like
going
that,
to affect their livelihood from here
yeah,
on.
it's like the threat isn't just Godzilla, stomping and breathing fire or atomic breath. He's almost just like a stain on the environment. Kind of like how Hiroshima and Nagasaki are staying in Japan. Like Godzilla's like mere presence basically brings death.
Mm-hmm. And as we say that this is a story mostly about people, not necessarily about a monster, throughout the story, there's a love triangle, right? This is very much a part of the story. This is not just kind of like a throwaway thing as it is seen in the kind of the King of the Monsters cut, where it's kind of referenced several times, but you don't really see, these people in struggling with their relationships. There's the Emiko. Her father is the kind of the head scientist. He's a paleontologist who's kind of working on this. With the National Diet sends him, which is kind of like the equivalent of American Senate and Congress, and she becomes very involved. At the same time, her boyfriend is part of the Coast Guard, and of course, like we said, the Coast Guard, one of the ships is missing or has been affected, so he's on the lookout. He's part of this team, and then on the other side of that is the scientist who's creating this mysterious. He's creating something that is so dangerous, he won't tell people what it is. And when it comes down to nothing is working, the military cannot fight, it doesn't matter, nothing is making it Godzilla. It is Emiko pleading to Dr. Serizawa, who is actually her fiance, that she is.
It was an arranged fiance.
Yeah, so she's trying to undo that in order to actually marry her boyfriend. But she has to plead with him that I know this is too dangerous, but we need something. Nothing else is working, and that's when we start to hear about his philosophy as well about, I can't let this out, because if people learn that I have created this, if governments learn that I have created this, after we use it, this will be the next H-bomb. This will be the next atom bomb. This will be the next thing that's used for mass destruction. And he's very heavy-hearted in having to use his creation. And very unlike you would think in most kind of mad scientist kind of perspective you see in monster movies. He's very mindful of the dangers involved in these types of weapons and how it can, how his discoveries can be weaponized. So very different take.
Yeah,
because
that's the thing. Like as a humanist, Inshiro Honda knows there is no true evil in humanity. There are definitely bad people, as we see in later Showa films with human antagonists, but there is no human villain in the original Gojira.
Mm-hmm.
There is actually no real villain. It's just the villain is just societal issues.
Yeah, the villain is the war.
Yeah,
and the people that are left coping with it.
Yeah, because the Emiko's father, like at first, like he refused to have Godzilla killed, but his reasoning makes sense. It's not just Godzilla. They said like his reasoning behind the importance of Godzilla actually makes sense. He wants to study how could Godzilla survive being nuked, and he wants to apply that to, humans, like especially growing Cold War. In their minds, being nuked could very well be an inevitability. So in his eyes, he's trying to see if Godzilla could, be a key to making sure we survive, World War III. But, eventually he has to learn that Godzilla could be a scientific gold mine, but that gold mine is also on the verge of exploding and is already, wreaking havoc. And
I think he also, I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think also he's very much, he's saddened by the idea of having to kill a creature.
Yeah, he sees.
Why does humanity have the right to kill this creature? Just because we created it, we still shouldn't kill it.
He doesn't see Godzilla as a monster. He sees it as an animal.
Mm-hmm.
That's the thing about the original Godzilla, the Gojira, and Godzilla himself. Godzilla is not a creature of malice. I feel like he's almost on par with the original King Kong. Yeah. He's just an animal. And even though he comes across scary, he's not doing it out of pure hatred, or as we see in when Godzilla is usually a villain, they usually Godzilla films that have an antagonistic Godzilla play him up as much more spiteful and hateful, and that kind of anger, and it's totally understandable. But this Godzilla is just a victim in and around himself, and Emiko's father sees that.
Mm-hmm.
And with Dr. Serizawa, people have said, oh, he looks like a stereotypical mad scientist with an eye patch. But when you actually understand the reasoning behind a lot of this stuff, it becomes poignant. He doesn't have an eye patch because mad scientist. He has an eye patch because he was a POW during World War II and he lost his eye. It's very clear that he understands this stakes, and again, he, like as I said before, he's very much a equivalent of Oppenheimer. Mm-hmm. Especially after World War II, Oppenheimer went through deep depression when he realized just how dangerous the atomic bomb is, and it shows even Inshiro Honda, he doesn't blame the people who made the bomb because he knows they're not pure evil. It's just circumstance.
Yeah. The fact that he still has remorse after being a POW for humanity as a whole is very telling also, from this kind of humanist approach of telling a story, like a post-war story. All of those characters have been affected by the war. He's a very extreme example, but he's also someone who's isolated himself just to spend time with his work. So it's fascinating to see the difference in the characters. They're not. See, this is part of also the problem of the King of the Monsters version, is that they're very cardboard cutouts of caricatures, and it isn't until you see this original cut that you really get to know these characters and care for them. So that's another great thing about this film. So I want us to talk a little bit about some of the actors that we're seeing here. We've mentioned a few of the main characters, but it's also really fascinating. Much like old Hollywood, Touhou was a studio system, and all of the actors are contracted actors that you will see their faces pop up all over, not just other Touhou films, but other Godzilla films. It's really kind of becomes a who's who after this film.
Yeah, they'll appear in one film, then the sequel, they'll appear again as completely different characters.
Right. Very few times do you see a character come back. Actually, I think the only time I know of a definite returning character besides when you get to the Mothra twins is the return in Godzilla 1985 of
I believe it's I know Emiko's father actually reappears in Godzilla Raids Again.
Right, yeah.
Aside from that, the only reoccurring characters are the Mothra twins and Godzilla himself. Emiko's actress reprises her role for Destroya.
Oh, see, I haven't seen Destroya in a while. Let's start with the head scientist, Emiko's father. So that's Takashi Shimura. He's in Seven Samurai and many of the kind of period pictures that are coming out at the time. He also shows up in a few of the other monster movies later in this run. So he's very much part of the Touhou system. Mm-hmm. Dr. Serizawa is played by Akio Harada.
Yeah, Harada.
Harada's in
a lot.
Yeah, but he is in so many Touhou pictures, and he's actually in Godzilla, King Kong versus Godzilla, playing a very similar character but without an eye patch. So that one's a little close too.
I think his last major role was in Terror of Mechagodzilla. Mm-hmm. He plays a scientist, but I feel like, I don't know if Inshiro Honda meant it intentionally or so, but he was thematically the exact opposite of his character in Godzilla, in Gojira, where Gojira is a scientist racked with guilt, but still trying to help humanity. His character in Terror of Mechagodzilla is a man consumed by vengeance.
Yeah, so it's the flip, which is interesting to see. Emiko is played by Momoko Kochi. She was in a few other films from the same time period. She's in The Mysterians. That's what it is. She's in The Mysterians. Yeah.
I haven't seen that one that often. I only seen it like once.
Yeah, that one I saw that maybe once too. It's a very good film though.
It's great. It's just one of those films I don't really revisit often when it comes to the Toho library.
yeah, it's a straight sci-fi. It's a fun one though.
It's basically Japanese Day of the Earth Stood Still.
Yeah, definitely. Very good film. Highly recommend. But kind of the star of the film is Akira Takarata. Now, Takarata has become kind of one of the most famous Godzilla actors, kaiju actors in the kind of Toho universe. He shows up in so many films. He's very fan friendly. He's appeared at many events.
He's in a lot. He's one of those like convention guys.
Yeah, I've met him a couple times. He's very sweet, but he has a long history working in kaiju films in Toho and all kinds of films, to be honest.
Yeah, and I know both Takarata and Serizawa's actor have also appeared in television in the tokusatsu genre, primarily with stuff like Ultraman.
That's what's kind of great about this period of filmmaking. Like I said, this is kind of how we think of old Hollywood, how it would work, that you would be under contract. It was far different than kind of how we see it today, where everyone's kind of a lone agent. It's a completely different system. The star system is based on how Hollywood structure was built, and it crosses over to many of the similar systems, and Toho is an example of that. But it's always fun when you're watching a Toho picture to find at least one or two people, even if it's not a kaiju film, but a few kaiju actors in there. It's always fun.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some great stuff. So knowing that there are how many Godzilla films are there right now, Chris?
35.
There's 35. So this is a 1954 film that becomes one of the biggest franchises in history.
The longest running continuing franchise. I think it actually beat James Bond.
Wow. Which is one of the first franchised outside of television. The kind of most prolific.
Yeah, very much so. Like earlier in November, it was the 66th anniversary.
Mm-hmm.
The thing about this is a film series that's still going for 66 years.
Yeah. And it's still generating huge box office, not only in Japan, not only in America, but all over the world.
Mm-hmm. Godzilla is a pop culture icon.
Yeah.
Very much so, is a staple of genre.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you got King Kong, you got Superman, Batman, or if you want to go to like genre fairs, Darth Vader, Chewbacca, Freddy, Jason, the Universal Pantheon. Godzilla is you can't scoff. Godzilla is one of the most recognizable movie monsters of all time.
Mm-hmm. And there were definitely giant monsters before Godzilla, but kaiju as an industry, as a genre, I think really comes from the following and the kind of the output of Godzilla films.
Yeah, especially Toho. Like once Godzilla was released, they released Godzilla Raids Again, Rodan, Mothra, Mysterians, King Kong versus Godzilla, Frankenstein Conquers the World. And though it took quite a bit, eventually in 1965, you got studios like Daiei, launched the Gamera series, which is also just a long-running franchise. You got other studios like Nikatsu, and other studios going and making, their own kaiju films. And then television, when television went huge in Japan, Tsuburaya founded his own studio and created Tsuburaya Productions and created the Ultra franchise, which revolutionized the genre further with tokusatsu as a whole. And then Toei came in with Super Sentai, which Americans would know as Power Rangers and Kamen Rider. And it's all this linking, it all links together. And Godzilla is basically the seed that planted the tree and all of its branches.
Yep. So you would not have so many of the franchises that we all love today had it not been for this film and the people who made it happen. So that's why, I mean, Godzilla is a classic, and even in a world where we had King of the Monsters, it was still a classic monster movie. In a world where we have Gojira, we have probably one of the smartest monster movies in history.
Agreed.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit, Chris. What do we think are some of the main, like, what would you say are the main reasons why Godzilla is still important today?
I feel Godzilla is one of the first major Japanese films to reach an international audience and gave Japan become a on the international stage of cinema. I feel two of the most important Japanese films to help launch it is Gojira and Seven Samurai.
Mm-hmm.
Those
And
like
both are
those two.
Touhou, but
Both are Toho, and people say like, "Oh, you're comparing Godzilla to Seven Samurai." It's just like one. I think both the filmmakers will be very upset of you being scoffing at Gojira because, as we said before, they're best. The Shiro Honda and Kurosawa were best friends,
yeah.
so they were.
And samurai films are a genre.
It
I
is
mean,
a genre. It is
we don't
genre
think of it
films.
that way here in America because maybe we only know a handful of those kind of period pictures that are based in samurai. But that's a genre just like we think of action films like Dirty Harry. It's a different representation culturally,
Mm-hmm.
but it's Seven Samurai is the film that broke that genre open to an international stage. And it's definitely an important film. It's a wonderful film. Um, but it's, yes, I think it is definitely the kind of the 1-2 punch of Seven Samurai and Gojira
Yeah,
that brings it to the world.
Gojira basically was the first Japanese blockbuster to reach an international audience and made people look at Japan. Eventually, people will be looking at, not only Japanese media, but I feel like it also helped, Asian cinema as a whole.
Yeah.
Like it helped legitimize Asian cinema, especially in this day and age where people are loving, the newest Ghibli film, the newest South Korean drama, Bong Joon-ho film. You got Hong Kong cinema and Chinese cinema. People are going over, and I feel like Gojira helped people look at genre films from Asia.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't think we could say that martial arts flicks from the Hong Kong studios made a dent in American culture until much later.
This is the late '60s, early '70s with the Shaw brothers.
But even Shaw Brothers was Grindhouse in America.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think you see kind of anyone who's a known name, like a household name, until you see Bruce Lee.
Bruce Lee, yes.
But Bruce Lee made that crossover thanks to television in America, and then his films came with him from that. There's a lot that Godzilla does in kind of making it Asian cinema more accessible to Americans and other countries.
As well as after post-World War II, Japan, Americans can actually see Japanese people as human and not just some of the yes, they were kind of the bad guys in World War II, but the way we treated Japanese internment camps and the propaganda, the severely racist propaganda that still makes me very uncomfortable. It is just we finally get a film, even though it was still Americanized, it doesn't treat the Japanese as any more than people, which is obviously is what we should be doing. Mm-hmm. And I feel another thing, my second reason why I feel like Gojira is so important is it shows the work of practical effects, and specifically not only with suitmation, because that same year in America we will get basically America's go-to suit monster was the Gill Man. So with the 1-2 punch of the Gill Man and Gojira, it will lead into legitimizing suits. With later on we'll get the 70s and 80s with films like Alien, Predator. Some of these iconic monsters, and even like full makeup effects, like not as an extreme degree with like the Alien and Predator, but Freddy Krueger, Jason Voorhees, Pumpkinhead, and all these creatures, and Godzilla basically for special effects work legitimize the idea of making a monster out of a suit, as well as miniature works, which is
so I was just going to say miniatures are so important in this film too.
Yeah, miniatures, is one of, I feel Eiji Tsuraya is one of the masters of miniature work.
Yeah, and I would say maybe our third point would be the theme of the film, the anti-war anti nuclear powers, anti mass destruction, and to use genre in a way like
Mm-hmm.
science fiction does so well of telling this very important story to make it accessible and to make it so you will think about it afterwards after you've enjoyed this monster movie. You'll still be thinking, well, what did we really do?
Yeah,
And that's important.
very much so. It uses a monster as a metaphor, which was prolific in literature, but in cinema, it wasn't really that common
I think,
until
yeah, I think any of the interpretations we see in America before this are based on literary monsters. Yeah.
yeah, and some of them get a little diluted. Not saying they all do, but I will say Frankenstein, Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, the novel, is much more powerful
Mhm.
than the Universal movie, and I love the Universal movie. The Universal
Yeah.
movie is a classic, and you can still read a lot into it, especially with knowing the backstory of James Whale.
Hmm.
But I feel Mary Shelley's work is much, much more poignant, with its themes. And with Gojira, we get a cinematic monster with very strong themes, and we'll get that later on with films such as Alien with its themes on sexual violence, Jurassic Park on the themes of commercialism and genetic engineering.
Yeah.
And even to this day, we get films like Bong Joon-ho's The Host.
Mhm. Yeah, it definitely sets a stage for having this big discussion, and that's what's important. And it also, even within the Godzilla franchise, you see environmental themes. You see themes of, like you said, commercialism comes up. Um, there's lots of things that throughout this series of films, even though we kind of maybe American culture tends to generally blow them off as just, fun action and monster stomping on things. There's a lot of messages throughout the series. Maybe not every single picture is as effective, but it definitely
Yeah,
starts this strong theme from the get-go, and that's important too.
very much so.
And I think the last thing would be, like we said earlier, this is the genre defining film. This is the film that makes kaiju happen. This it sets the spark.
Kaiju Eiga and Tokusatsu as a whole,
Yeah.
which is still a major genre in Japan.
Hmm. And I think now it's I mean, growing up in the 80s and 90s, I would definitely say that this was very much a what we would say is the nerd kind of scene, and this is something very kind of small base. Now I would say Godzilla and other kaiju films are mass market. It's no longer kind of a like a geek only kind of thing. I think this is
Hmm.
fairly accept. I mean, because you have generations now of people who grew up with these films as part of their lives, and it
You,
just became even bigger.
yeah, you can just go into a Walmart toy section. And
Yeah.
there's a small like it's not as huge as like Marvel or DC, but you will see a Godzilla section or FYE if there's a FYE still
Yeah.
around in your town. They're devoting an entire section to Godzilla,
Hmm.
and
Yeah.
it's
I
just
mean, every um, we have so few places we can buy physical DVDs and Blu-rays anymore. But I would say, aside from FYE, even Best Buy, you'll always find a section with not just anime, but there will be monster films that even if they don't use the term kaiju, they are grouping together.
yeah, you'll see, Godzilla Blu-rays, you'll see Ultraman, you'll see,
Hmm.
some of the indie stuff that's now getting much more stronger releases, and as well as or the lesser known films like being released by like Media Blasters or
Hmm.
SRS Cinema.
Yeah, and I think we've gotten to a point also in society where I think everybody knows what Godzilla is, even if
Hmm.
they've only seen a few minutes, if they haven't seen the first film, but they've seen others, if they've seen the American films versus the original Japanese films.
Or
I think
parodies.
everyone. Yeah, I mean, even back in because it was the 70s, there was Godzilla versus Bambi,
Yeah.
was just a known thing, and I think much like Star Wars or Star Trek or any of the sci-fi franchises that come from America, Godzilla is just as high up, and internationally just well known.
Yeah, I agree. I very
Yeah.
much he is very much again like on par with characters like Superman and Darth Vader as one of the
Mhm.
most significant pop culture figures of genre.
And I will say, uh, a big part of that was through Forrest Ackerman and Famous Monsters magazine, and
Mhm.
then when Fangoria started in Starlog, so it had coverage in kind of the publications that sci-fi fans and horror fans were already reading,
Yeah.
but
The
it
first
just got
issue,
bigger.
yeah. The first issue of Fangoria is Godzilla. So I think that just shows that for horror fans, I know I noticed some horror fans are a little dismissive of Godzilla.
Yeah.
Godzilla is just as important to the horror community as it is with, sci-fi or just the niche thing of just giant monster aficionados. Because again, the first issue of Fangoria is Godzilla. And I feel
Yeah,
like
I mean,
that says a lot already.
maybe not so much the rest or not all of the franchise films I think are as crossover, but the original Godzilla is very much a science fiction horror film. It is a
Hmm.
genre crossing film.
The influence of Godzilla is so strong. He pops up every now and then in other
Mhm.
film genres, or like you watch cartoons and there 9 out of 10 there's at least one episode that makes fun of Godzilla. Or I don't want to just say it's problematic, but when like a U.S. cartoon, they go to Japan, there's an episode where let's go to
Yeah.
Japan, and 9 out of 10 you see a Godzilla equivalent in the background.
Oh, I mean, Simpsons did that. I mean,
Yes, Simpsons.
so many, and it's poking fun. At least in the Simpsons, I can say off the top of my head. I can't say if I can say all versions, but
Mm,
it's a parody of what Americans think Japan is.
yes,
And so it's poking fun at us for our limited view of another culture, but
definitely.
it's shorthand. It's just part of everyday
Hmm.
vernacular. So Godzilla is definitely a super important film. If you've never seen the original, if maybe you were like us and grew up in a day where, I mean, when I started collecting videotapes, um, I had King of Monsters on my shelf, and it was on TV a lot. So I remember how important it was. Maybe it was '04, where I trekked into the city on my birthday with friends to go to the film forum to see a screening of when they released in the States the original '54 Gojira, and it was important. This is a film. This is film history. That's all there is to it. Not Japanese film history, not monster movie film history. This is film history, and
Hmm.
it's super important. So let's just take a minute. I want to. I know your house is full of Godzilla. I know my house
Yeah,
is full of Godzilla. So we each picked just a couple of things
yeah.
to share with you guys. What do you want to start with, Chris?
I guess I'll go first.
Yeah.
So, as someone who's big into Godzilla, I did pick up the Criterion collection, but the thing is, I want to at least have my Godzilla films in my shelf because that Criterion collection is mostly a book. So earlier in the yeah, that's it. So
Massive.
we're both sharing our version. So Victoria has the main release
Yeah.
from Criterion, but earlier in the year, a kaiju comic artist Matt Frank, you people have seen his work before. He has worked on several Godzilla comics. He recently did the Arrow set for Gamera,
Yep.
but he made a print for the Showa Godzilla films. Specifically, if you just wanted to buy, he said, hey, if you buy this on eBay, this 8 disc like Blu-ray case, and pay me like for the print, I will send you basically a slipcover for the Blu-ray. So I got right here his artwork for the slipcover he did, signed by him.
That's
It
excellent.
shows all the monsters that are included in the Showa era from 1954 to 75.
That's
And
great.
and that makes it cool because I can actually enjoy the book as a book.
Right.
I don't have to just like worry about the Blu-rays themselves. I can actually just enjoy the book on its own.
And I will say, as amazed as I was to get a Criterion collection of at least the Shaw era, I was hoping that they would. I was saying this earlier when we were looking at the extras disc, and my husband and I was really hoping that it was going to be from Gojira to '85 because that's kind of almost like a book ending of stories. But
Yeah,
it made sense to break them up. I guess hopefully that means we'll get other Criterion
yeah.
sets. Yeah,
It'd be really
but
cool if we get the Heisei Millennium films.
yeah.
But as it sucks that I think as of right now, most of the Heisei and all the Millennium films are by Sony. I
Mm,
know Kraken, which is owned by Sentai Filmworks, released. I believe it's still in circulation. Return of Godzilla, but only the Japanese version, not the Raymond Burr American cut, which I actually own on bootleg. And Biollante is sadly still out of print.
Yeah, I will admit that a good portion of the later films in my collection are also bootlegs of Japanese versions with English subs on them. It's great, but it is, this is not something that fits easily on my shelf. This will go on my bookshelf, but I want to, you want some way to house your Blu-rays better. I was always worried that they're going to slip out. So I'm probably going to try and find a similar solution. What other editions of the film do you have?
I only have the Criterion release. I had the classic media release, not the one you have. They did a re-release when Godzilla 2014 came out, and of that film. But before I got the Criterion collection, I bought the Criterion set of the Showa era. I currently still own it for some reason. Criterion's first release of Gojira, where it was released on its own. So once I got that, I feel like the version I got from Classic Media was a little irrelevant.
Yeah.
So I gave that DVD to my friend. He's a friend of mine. His name's Jason. He's a artist. He does some work for Gargantucast along with my other artist friend Marcel Rocha. Check out their work. And I gave it to him as a goodbye gift, as his family had to go to Cambodia for a few years because his family got transferred there for education gift. Yeah, so I gave him some hey, here's some movies you can have. So I gave him that copy of Gojira.
Yeah, I mean, I had a couple different versions on VHS, but I gifted them to people once I got DVDs, and then I think I did the same with the old DVD I had when this edition came out. Now, this is Classic Media, right?
Yes, that's the first. Yeah, the Classic Media release, the original.
So this is the first American release of official release of the Gojira cut. It does have on a second disc the King of Monsters cut, and I should say King of Monsters is an extra on the Criterion Collection Blu-ray set. But I mean, this is a beautiful set as well, and it was perfect for when we met Akira Takarata to have him sign.
That's so cool.
Which is really beautiful. So it's always going to be there. I love that. As far as other things, I wanted to share a book that was a really big influential in me, kind of became almost like a checklist to make sure I'd seen all of them and kind of where the franchise was in the 90s, because this book goes all the way from the original Godzilla King of Monsters pre-Gojira, because I think it's 96, all the way up to Destroya, which at the time was being touted as the end of the cycle of Godzilla and there would be no more. So this is a great little book that goes through every single film, gives you rundowns, give you synopsis, lots of great pictures. The author, Robert Marrero, I definitely recommend. This is I believe it's Phantasm. This is Phantasma Books. So if you're looking for a guide, King of the Movie Monsters, this is a great one. I'm sure you can find this on eBay pretty cheap these days, since there's more movies to talk about than they did in the book.
Yeah, the book is definitely outdated.
Yeah, but it's still a fun read.
Definitely.
Yeah, it you have to take it with a grain of salt because of their interpretation of the first film, because it's based on King of the Monsters.
Yeah, they had to work with what they get.
Yeah. So what do you got?
For books, my research material is Critical History and Filmography of the Godzilla series by David Collette, who did the commentary for the Criterion release. This book is a much more, it doesn't have pictures sadly, but it goes very much in depth of the Godzilla franchise up until Godzilla versus Godzilla Final Wars, which was the last film of Japan, because this book was released because it was focusing specifically on the Japanese films. So it didn't really focus on both the 98 film and Godzilla 2014, and this was before the release of Shin Godzilla.
Right. I mean, Final Wars was a huge deal when that came out too.
Yeah, that was also touted as the last Godzilla.
Yeah, that's the thing. It's like, oh, we're gonna get one more last big Godzilla movie. So, it's kind of like the joke about bands like the Rolling Stones comeback tours and all those kind of things. How many times is Motley Crue gonna get back together and tour? Godzilla movies for a while were doing that to us too.
Or Hayao Miyazaki retiring from animation.
I retired, but I have one more story yet to tell. You know, like
Yeah.
that 10 years later. Wait, he still had one. Okay, wait a minute. I know I have a ton of figures. I know you have a ton of figures. Let's give a couple you want to share with us.
I got NECA's Godzilla 54. This is one of my favorite figures, but this is the re-release they did. I didn't get the box version that has the poster art. I got this at Walmart, which has the really hard to deal with clamshell, but this is a really cool repaint of it. Comes with it's in a drawer, but it does come with a beam effect. That's how you know it's the new version. It comes with a beam effect. The paint's different, where the original version had like a blue dry brushing, while this has a gray to reflect the film being black and white. Tweaked dorsal fins. It looks much better. And one thing I like to compare it with is the SH Monster Arts Godzilla 2019. And I think it's really fascinating just to see how Godzilla has changed over the years.
Oh yeah,
I got so many Godzilla figures, but I always like to compare and contrast Godzilla then and Godzilla now, especially with Godzilla King of the Monsters, the 2019 version that came out last year, for Godzilla's 65th anniversary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have two, because I have a lot too. I tried to find the ones that were representative of the first film in my collection, and these are both Bandai's, and I think they're both from '05, to be honest.
Okay.
But it's two different. This was the kind of like smaller Japanese line, and where it's another one where they've grayed him to kind of reflect the black and white of the film.
Yeah, the movie monsters, Godzilla 54.
Yeah. So then this was the Bandai set that was pretty easily found in American stores.
Yeah, you can still find that guy at Walmart, 68.
Yeah.
Really love that figure.
Yep. There's I have 3 or 4. I have the Destroyer one too. I really love that one in a Shin. This is a great line from Bandai, and I loved it that you can find them in like Target and like regular stores. It's not just having to wait till you go to conventions to find a good Godzilla figure nowadays.
Yeah, though, if you want to get everyone else, you're probably going to have to go to conventions.
Yeah, I mean, my King Caesar and my Jet Jaguar definitely had to come from cons. I wasn't finding that in the stores.
Yeah.
But, and then the one last one I wanted to share, little plushy guy. This is actually what they were selling at Film Forum when I went to see the anniversary special screenings of
It's adorable.
Gojira. He's so cute. I love him. And he's not, I have the plushie that came out for the anniversary last year, and it's totally different. This one is still kind of mean looking. He's kind of like,
this is the plushie I got of Godzilla.
Yeah, I have that one too. That one's great.
Yeah.
So
I know they I know they're actually releasing what's funny, at the FYE I work at, they actually released King Ghidorah finally.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah.
A King Ghidorah plushie, which I might get soon.
Very fun. I want to get a Mothra larva one.
Yeah, that'll be adorable.
That would be great.
And last thing we're going to compare, because we both have the books in the same line, is the Touhou Sfx books, which were books that were mostly released in the Godzilla store first in Tokyo, and now they opened another one in Osaka. And last year, I forgot the name of this chain. It was like some Japanese specialty shop where they had pop-up Godzilla store sections. And
I think it was Kinokuniya Books.
Yes.
I got it at Kinokuniya. There's one Kinokuniya in Manhattan, and then there's also a Kinokuniya in North Jersey at the Mitsuya Japanese market. So I know they had it at those.
My mom actually, she had one because she lives in LA at the time. And they say, hey, there's one in your area. If I send you some cash, can you just go to the shop, look for Godzilla stuff, and mail it to me? Mm-hmm. And she did. And I would get this one figure, but it's on top of my shelf. I have a Shin Bandai figure that's a replica of the statue in Japan.
Very cool.
Yeah. And the one I got, what's funny, we both have at least the same one. You got 54. So yeah. To show that off, it's what these books are. They're basically, to explain, these are tourist books, but if you're into just pictures, these books are full of so many great behind the scene pictures.
Oh yeah, there's so many, like them doing like the model work here. I love these. Just in the very beginning of the book, you can see them working on the model versions. It's so great. It's good stuff.
Yeah, and what's cool is the captions are in Japanese and English because again, these are
Yes.
tourist books, especially for American tourists, because they know, hey, dumb American weebs are probably going to go to these stores if they visit Japan. Why not just cater to them? Though I kind of wish that those stores have international shipping, but that's just me.
Yeah.
And the one I'm going to share is again compare and contrast Shin Godzilla.
Yeah.
Which is again a compare and contrast of the Godzilla design and the images. This is just like really great high def images of Shin Godzilla. They showed the forms. Let me see, where's the page? There's a page that has shows off here we go, the CGI model.
Oh, nice. Very cool. I have to pick that one up.
Yeah, and one I have in my book collection. I also have 54 because I'm going to I haven't said it in the episode yet, but I'll just say right now, Godzilla 54 is my favorite film of all time. And both
that's actually I forgot to mention that was the other reason I asked you.
Yeah, because it is my favorite.
With me.
Yeah, it is my favorite film of all time. And I also got War of the Gargantuas because it's one of my favorite kaiju films, as well as just hey, it's based off my podcast.
Yep.
So yeah. It was a tough choice. It was between the Gargantuas or Biollante. Just like Gargantuas.
Yeah, I think it's a more fun title.
And the Godzilla store is right near the hotel that I forgot the name of the hotel, but people call it the Godzilla Hotel.
Yeah,
because
I mean
it has because you have Godzilla's head, and then there's the Godzilla room, and not far from that hotel is the Tokyo Godzilla store. And again, they recently just opened one in Osaka that seems to be much more larger, much more in depth. So it just shows Touhou is not slowing down with Godzilla anytime soon.
No, and it's good to see that they're proud of it again. I think it's a franchise that through the years, their opinion of it themselves waxed and waned. So it's good to see, especially I think since Shin, there's been a renewed love from both fandom and Toho in the product.
Yeah.
So
the release of Shin for Japan and the rest of the world, the MonsterVerse.
I mean, seeing Shin in a theater in America was probably not the same experience as seeing it in Japan. I feel like most of the audience was disappointed by what they saw, and I absolutely loved it, and I thought it was a great critique of modern Japanese society, and unfortunately, it feels like it's the world we're living in right now. But Shin's a great film, and I highly recommend as well. But let's wrap up our talk on the original. Thank you so much for coming on the show with me today, Chris.
And I'm always willing to talk about Godzilla. I mean, I have my own podcast for that, but if you're going to invite me to talk about Godzilla on your show, I'm your guy.
We're just spreading the gospel of Godzilla. That's what it is.
Yeah. Our Lord and Savior Godzilla.
Oh yes. So, I mean, I've loved Godzilla since I was a little kid. The very first videotape I owned was Godzilla versus Megalon.
Same.
Yeah, I love that movie.
Was yours the one that had the Twin Towers on the cover?
No, I didn't have. I had a poster of that, but the one I had was them all kind of brawling, kind of like the.
Okay, yeah. My VHS copy was the one with the Twin Towers on the poster, which. Yeah, that and Kong 76. Those films are just like that's unfortunate.
Yeah, and it's also strange that they chose to advertise it that way since it doesn't even take place in America. So
they did it because of Kong 76.
Yeah, definitely. But still a fun movie. That movie has a soft spot in my heart because of that. But the original is by far the most iconic, the most important, and that's why it's a modern classic. And we had to talk about it today on the show. So. Chris, let people know where they can find out more about you and Gargantucast.
Okay, so yeah, you can find Gargantucast wherever you get your podcast: Spotify, Google Play, Apple Podcast, Stitcher. I'm also a writer for Something Ghoulish. Victoria is one of the editors, and you can find my writings mostly on Kaiju Works and on somethingghoulish.com. You can follow Gargantucast on Twitter at Gargantucast, and you can follow me personally on Twitter at Chris_Kaiju.
And I highly recommend if you love talking monster movies to listen to Gargantucast. It's like hanging out with a bunch of friends talking about why we love the movies we love, which is what I try to do here too. So I really appreciate it, and thank you so much again for coming on. We're both part of the Ghoulish family, so please check out somethingghoulish.com so you can read Chris's work, you can read some of my work on horror. Thanks again, and it was great having this talk with you, Chris, and thanks everybody else for hanging out with us.
Glad you're able to hear my nonsense.
Definitely. We appreciate it. So thanks again, guys, and we'll see you next time.
Armcast, Dead Sexy Podcasts. I'm your host, Armand Rosamilia. Fridays exclusively on Project Entertainment Network, where I interview authors, publishers, editors, artists, filmmakers, narrators, the lady from Walmart, whoever I feel like talking to. That's every Friday, Armcast, right here on Project Entertainment Network.
This has been a presentation of the Project Entertainment Network.